I am very excited to share this video with all of you. I had the good fortune to spend some time with celebrity detective John Buehler to discuss open carry in Florida from the law enforcement point of view. Let's be honest. As gun owners, we are very protective of our Second Amendment right, but we rarely take the time to sit and listen to our law enforcement community to bridge the gap in order to make the transition to open carry safe and smooth for both sides. Well, today is that day. And what better law enforcement veteran to speak with than John Buehler? John comes from a long line of law enforcement officers. He has over 30 years under his belt himself. He has investigated over 140 murder cases, including some high-profile ones he'll share with us. John features regularly in investigative documentaries on TV, Netflix, YouTube, and other streaming networks. He has countless trophies and medals in competitive shooting, and he's one of the most accomplished instructors I know. Most importantly, John is one of the nicest, funniest, and most humble human beings I have ever met. So, without further ado, here is my conversation with John Buehler. So, John, why did you choose law enforcement to begin with?
I couldn't be a porn actor.
Didn't have equipment for that.
I think there are 10 of us in the family that became cops, from my grandfather, uncles, cousins, and then now we've got my son and some other, second cousins. And we had a big family, so it's not like everybody was a cop, but it just seemed like my uncle, he worked for Minneapolis Police Department, and he was always telling the greatest stories. He was always laughing. And I asked him one time, I said, gosh, I was like 13. And he said, when I asked him, do you have fun at work? And he said, oh, I got the best job in the world. I work with the greatest guys. We're always laughing, having a good time. And I'm thinking, this is pretty interesting. And my dad was in manufacturing. I asked him, do you ever have fun at work? Oh, no. Yeah, work not for fun. You get satisfaction out of making things. Like, well, gosh, I don't want to go through life like that. So that was kind of the thing. I just thought cop work would be fun. I couldn't fly fighter jets. I didn't have the eyesight for it. Okay. And Enzo Ferrari didn't call me to race his cars. So that's it.
I love the sense of humor, man. I love the sense of humor.
Oh my gosh.
And so what cities did you serve in law enforcement? And because now you're in Sarasota, you have close ties to the law enforcement community. Yeah. Where were you before that?
Well, I did a year and a half as a community service officer in Eden Prairie Police Department as a suburb of Minneapolis. And that was fine. Small town, small suburb, not much crime. I tried to get hired on Minneapolis Police Department, but they weren't looking for my flavor back when I turned 21. So I had an uncle in California. He sent me an application for out there. I sent it in more. Joe, it was more as a gag than anything else. I thought there is no way they're hiring me. And took the test. Apparently, they thought that I would do something decent, and then they hired me. So I worked at Modesto Police Department from September of 1978 until August of 2010. And what a great time. It was just, not everything was great about it, but 95% of it was wonderful. It was fun and interesting.
Well, you certainly became a celebrity with some of the cases that you worked on. What did you tell us about some of the high profile cases that you told us, like who they were and just briefly a little bit of a story?
Well, Modesto was the fifth, when I left, it was the fifth most violent per capita city in California. And when you have a lot of violence in a town, and we weren't that big, 210,000 people, we only had 288 cops. So it wasn't like a giant police department. It was roughly the same size as one of the 20 divisions at LAPD, if that gives a perspective to people. We had 20 murders a year generally is what the average was for quite a while. And that's where most of my career was spent, was working the murders. We worked the serial killer up in Yosemite, Carrie Stainer, who killed the 4 women up there. We worked Lacey Peterson case. I was one of the 3 main guys on that. They're interesting and everything like that, but we had a lot more murders that didn't capture the media attention that to me were much more interesting, although the Yosemite one was pretty good.
All right, John, this is fantastic. I wanted to give the viewers a little bit of a background of your experience and some of the fun stuff, for lack of a better term, that you have dealt with. But we are here to talk about the point of view of law enforcement on open carry. I've made a couple of videos on what my personal point of view, what The general point of view is on open carry, but we need to talk about how law enforcement feels. So I have a few questions that I'd like to ask you.
Sure.
And we can get right to it.
Okay.
So John, in general, are law enforcement officers on board with open carry? Not that the law has changed.
Well, you can't really paint with a broad brush on that subject with most of them. And here's kind of a breakdown. Just as a firearms instructor at the police department, I can tell you that 10% of the cops are really good shooters. 80% are pretty good when they leave the range twice a year. And then 10%, they struggle. So it kind of is the same way when it comes to cop opinions. They got to hire cops from the human race. So you're going to have a wide variety. But in general, I think most of the cops would probably look at it that if you're in a rural environment, not a big deal. If you're in an urban environment, why would you? Because there's things that come up and could collide with common sense and good reasoning.
Okay. So would you say then that in general, law enforcement officers would rather not see open carry in urban areas? And what would be some of the reasons that you would think they would feel it would make them uncomfortable to see it in an urban environment?
Yeah, I think that's safe to say that most cops probably are not in favor of urban open carry. There's several reasons for it. First off, not everybody in society is pro-gun, as you know. In fact, not even all cops are pro-gun. Most of them are pretty much 2A guys and gals, but not all of them are. The problem in an urban environment is almost provocative to the anti-gunners. So we have this victory, and it's great, and we can celebrate the fact that now we can open carry in the state of Florida, and that's dynamite in a lot of areas. But in a lot of areas, it's not, for a couple of reasons. Not everybody in Florida is a Floridian. You got a lot of people from the Midwest and the Northeast coming down snowbird season, and a lot of those people are coming from anti-gun states, and they're not gun people. They weren't raised in the gun culture. They don't understand the joy of shooting and the satisfaction that comes with it. And my view, if I was a cop, would be, Joe, why would you want to do that and maybe alienate people that we might be able to bring into the fold as Second Amendment people if they became a crime victim? And that's where a lot of converts come from, is yesterday's anti-gunner is today's firearms enthusiast because they got their butt whooped last night in a mugging. And so that is one of the things that will turn people. But if you turn people off by pushing it in their face, I don't know if there's any good that comes from that.
Good point. In your professional law enforcement opinion, do you believe open carry has the potential to become a problem in Florida?
Well, I think it could bring some problems. Yeah, not absolutely, but here's the thing. When you're a uniformed officer, and I'm not very big, I'm 5'10", 170. The biggest thing that feared me, or that I was fearful in police work, was there was going to be a guy who was younger, bigger, and stronger than me that was going to kick my ass and take my gun from me. And maybe I have to go hands-on with him and put him under, in custody before my backup is there. And that's always scary stuff, unless you're, Jackie, Chan, or, Chuck Norris or something like that. And most cops are. And so that was frightening. And if you're not a cop and you're walking around with your whatever handgun you have that's out there, first off, you're giving up your element of surprise if something bad happens in front of you. Because we can walk around, nobody knows that we have a firearm unless they personally know us, unless you're printing because you're not attired correctly or your gun is too big. But if you give up that element of surprise, then you also might attract the attention of maybe somebody who's off their meds, somebody who's a wacko, maybe somebody who's liquored up and they're angry for some reason, and they see you with that gun, and for whatever reason, it sets them off. And now you're fighting to maintain control of your gun. And especially if you've never been schooled in weapon retention tactics and things like that, maybe that's not going to be your best day of the week.
Okay. So how would a law enforcement officer see all that as a problem? Do you think there are going to be unnecessary calls, unnecessary incidents? Where do you see the problem for law enforcement?
Well, I think you nailed it right there. Anything that would have to do with that wouldn't probably occur if somebody was concealed carrying. And some cops don't like doing reports. I didn't mind doing reports. But every time something happens, that's more work for the officer. And then, of course, if it's something that doesn't need to have happened, then other victims have to wait their turn in line for dispatch for the cop to get out there, to help them. So if I was still working and I saw somebody walking down Main Street here in Sarasota that was open carrying, my thought would be, why are you doing that, pal? I wouldn't give him crap about it. He's a 2A guy. I'm good with that and everything. but he runs the potential of having a problem happen, and then I got to come and clean it up. And that's kind of one of the things that cops don't like having to do is clean up things that didn't have to happen.
So, as a law enforcement officer, what are some suggestions you have for open carry gun owners to make the interaction with law enforcement safe and smooth for all parties concerned?
Well, cops are hired from the human race, and some of them are great and some of them maybe not so much. So if you're dealing with an officer and you're open carry, first off, don't have an attitude, because that's just, even if the cop has an attitude, keep your attitude in check. That's usually where bad things happen, is when people want to challenge. And most of the cops will realize that it's a law now and we have to go along with it. And they'll just probably be okay with it, even if they personally maybe don't believe in it, but it's a law. So you take an oath to defend those laws. And if they ask you for any identification information, because maybe they want to check and make sure you don't have a warrant while you're open carrying, well, I guess you could take a stand. I don't have to supply that. And maybe the officer has some reasons that you don't know about that he's going to say, no, actually you do. And if you take a stand on that, the next thing you know, you're in cuffs. Why provoke it? Why not just go along with the program, even if the cop is a jerk? Most aren't, but every once in a while one will be. So if you go along with the program, it's always easy to say, yeah, no problem. Here you go.
So, John, now we talked about the gun owners and some advice for gun owners, but how about advice for law enforcement officers? How should they interact with gun owners that are open carrying?
Well, for the older cops, I'm not going to be able to tell them much because they pretty much know it. For the younger cops, probably just use discretion and relax about it. If somebody's open carrying, they're probably going to be okay. Can't guarantee anything, but at least they have a weapon versus a bad guy who's got it concealed and you don't know where he has it. So there might be some trade-offs that actually aren't bad when it comes to open carry, from the law enforcement perspective.
Okay, terrific. So, John, I'd like to shift to your own personal point of view. We talked about law enforcement, but I want to know what John Buehler, the celebrity detective, feels himself about open carry. So with that said, what is your personal take on open carry?
Well, I've never had a personal opinion on anything else before today, so it's good to start with this. But I got a friend of mine. He was a lieutenant that I used to work for, and he lives out in East County. He's out in the sticks out there, and he's got acreage, and he's out mowing and doing stuff out there. And open carry makes sense for him. He just found a rattlesnake last year. The thing, it was like the size of my thigh. It was an Eastern Diamondback, beautiful snake. I mean, I wouldn't want to get bit by it, but a beautiful snake. So he's got stuff like that on his property, wild hogs and things like that. Open carry kind of makes, sense for him. So I can see him doing it. But for me, I wouldn't do it for the simple reason that I'm in town most of the time. I'm not out in the sticks. If I was, maybe open carry would make sense. But if I'm going to open carry out there, I'm going to carry a rifle. Well, why would you carry a pistol if you can carry a rifle? But if you're in town, I might have alluded to it before. I don't want to give up my element of surprise if somebody decides they want to take my car, take my wallet, or cause problems for a family member. So I would rather just be discreet about things. I never have to worry about any place I go because nobody knows I have it unless they know me. And then again, it goes right back to that provoking the anti-2A people. I would rather have them, maybe they'd get to know me and go, well, hey, that Buehler guy, he's not such a bad guy, even though he likes guns, rather than put them off at first because I'm open carrying and they won't even hear the fact that maybe I'm not as bad as they think I am because I like firearms. If that makes sense.
Absolutely.
Okay.
No, absolutely. Thank you for that.
So
when we had a conversation, you said that the negatives outweigh the positives for open carry. Could you elaborate on that?
Well, I think they do because I don't really think there's any advantage to open carry. The negatives, of course, are provoking people who don't like guns, giving up the element of surprise. You might have to fight to maintain control of your firearm if some wacko decides he wants to take it from you. And you won't have to deal with any of those things if you're carrying concealed. Now, I know there's people that are going to say, well, yeah, but what if you have to get the gun out really quick? Well, if you're making a car stop on Fruitville in 75 at 2 a.m. in uniform and you walk up on a car as a cop, yeah, you're going to be able to get that gun out quick because the driver might have just killed somebody and he's got a dead body in the bed of the truck and now he's going to take you on. But for us, if we were down at a steak joint off of Main Street and we were walking to Madison's, what's the advantage of open carry other than, provoking people. If we are walking, you and I are downtown, and we've talked about this before. If you're paying attention to your surroundings and you see somebody a half block away that's maybe charging at somebody with a broken bottle, and he's homeless, he's off his meds, he's got some issues and things like that, and you can feel bad for those folks, but they can be a danger. If I see that guy a half block away because I'm paying attention and I'm not absorbed in my phone, well, I'm going to go in a different direction. I'm not going to press into a bad situation. I'm out on the boat fishing and I see a shark circling the boat. I'm not going to jump in the water to cool off. In the same way, I'm not going to walk towards that kind of a threat, because if you can avoid that fight, you've won that fight.
So my next question, John, is what are some of the training considerations that open carry gun owners have to think about that maybe concealed carry gun owners don't have to?
Well, the retention is probably the big one. And they do give you a bit of firearms retention in the police academy and throughout your career in service training when you do your defensive tactics and things like that in the mat room and things, where you pin the hand and they have different ways to defeat somebody who's grabbing for your firearm. But the graveyard's full of dead cops that were killed with their own gun for a variety of different reasons. Some, they just, maybe they weren't up to the task. Others, they didn't think through the requirement that might meet them one day where they have to use their gun in self-defense. And because not everybody's cut out to be a cop that's hired to be a cop. And so if cops are getting killed with their own gun, why would I want to take that risk as somebody who doesn't have the backup available by a police radio? I don't have an impact weapon with me. Maybe I don't have a chemical agent with me. I don't have a taser with me or something like that. I don't have all these rungs of the use of force ladder that I can use either progressively or I can skip depending on the threat. I just don't want to go in without backup. And that's why I wouldn't open carry in an urban environment, because to me, you give up too much and I don't see the gain. I mean, it's one thing if you're going to a gun show and you're open carrying, depending on the show, if they allow that, because you're going to have like-minded individuals. Hey, I'm liking that. Where did you get that end frame? Or there could be any number of things they could come up with, strike up a conversation, make new friendships, things like that. But in an urban environment, to me, you're giving up way too much for very little gain. And the possibility, and we'll see it maybe eventually, that, somebody got killed because they were open carrying and somebody took exception to it and they took their gun. And if you want to open carry, I don't really think anything less of you for it. It's just not right for me. Now, if I was the size of Reacher, and somebody like that walking around with that sprayed on t-shirt like he's got, well, then maybe not so much of a worry, but I ain't Reacher. So I'm not going to advertise that and go down that route.
Now, from your experience in knowing civilians and being an instructor for so long, do you feel that there are enough people out there actually training to retain their firearms as opposed to just going to the range or perfecting their firearm skills, which we know even most people don't even do that? Do you feel there is enough training, or there was enough emphasis on the training that's necessary for open carry?
Well, if you're going to open carry, especially in an urban environment, if you're not a member of a jiu-jitsu or a martial arts gym and you're not doing that kind of training, to me, you're really taking a risk, because you're banking on a civil society remaining civil when there's uncivilized people roaming around looking for victims to devour. And you could be that victim because you're advertising it with the gun out. Whereas if the gun is concealed, you're not. And most situations we've been teaching for years. That's how we met and everything like that. But the necessity to be able to get the gun out quickly from a concealed position as a civilian, I think is overrated. If you're paying attention to your environment, if you're buried in your phone or you're thinking about other things and you're lost in a fog, maybe not so. But if you're watching your environment and paying attention to the color codes of awareness that most people are aware of, then you should be able to avoid a situation that would require an immediate quick draw thing that is going to put you behind the curve.
Terrific. Great advice. You want to touch on, in addition to this training for gun owners, talk a little bit about the physical condition that people should be in or should consider when they open carry?
Well, just going back to, somebody like Reacher or something like that. He could open carry all day. Nobody's going to mess with him. But if you're not him, or you're not in that kind of physical shape, if you're not willing to put the effort into getting in that physical shape, I think you're better off concealed carry because you're not drawing attention to yourself. And not everybody's situation. I mean, I'm not bench pressing, 350 pounds. We know somebody who does, but that's not part of my lifestyle. If you can eat good and be fit, that's always good. But if you put yourself in a position where you advertise you're a potential target, you might want to put some extra effort into getting trained so you can defeat against that attack.
Okay. And as far as what do you think about the mental state of mind that people need to have when you open carry and you are putting yourself out there? And again, we're not advocating that it's wrong and you shouldn't do it.
Right.
We are just having an open conversation, and everyone's entitled to their right. And we certainly support it in terms of everybody's right to do as they want. It's legal. It's open. You want to open carry, no problem. But what we do want to bring awareness to, obviously, and the reason we're talking about these things is so that people do think about this more deeply and take the necessary steps to make the open carry experience a better one for them.
Right.
If they choose to do it. Whether you conceal carry or you open carry, there is the mental attitude and the considerations that you have to take from an emotional standpoint. Because if you get into a confrontation, this is not just your physical fitness that's going to be in place. Are you in the right state of mind to handle the situation and take the right steps in order to make the open carry experience or your choice of open carry the right one? What would you say about that, the emotional and mental approach?
Well, it's just like any other thing that has to do with the firearms. If you haven't thought logically about, well, what if I actually had to use the gun? And there's been schools of thought, I've heard them over the years, where people say, well, John, you're really not going to know if you can pull the trigger until you're presented with that, event. And I think that's bullcrap. I don't believe that side of the coin. I believe that, whether it's a family member or a friend, if somebody was going to harm them severely, I believe in your heart that you could take action. And if the bad guy dies because of it, well, that's on him because he brought violence to you. And if you return more violence than he can enjoy, well, then he should have chose differently. So you have to have the right mindset when it comes to using a firearm in self-defense. The triad is mindset, gun handling, and marksmanship. So if you can't do all of those, then you're going to have some problems. But if I saw somebody on Main Street and they're open carrying, I wouldn't think less of them. It's not a risk I would take, but I wouldn't think, and hey, and I might even admire and make an offhand comment with a compliment to whatever they're carrying, depending on if it's a gun that I like. I don't think it's really a problem, but I think there's a potential problem that they might have to address, and that might not be their best day.
Okay. Last question.
Yeah.
All right. So now that open carry is available and we got constitutional carry and we don't need permits for concealed carry.
Right.
Is there a point or any advantages to getting a concealed carry permit still?
You can never go wrong with getting more training. And the advantage of having a Florida concealed carry license is, number one, if you roll into a gun store and you see a gun that you want and you purchase it, because you have the concealed carry license, you can walk out with it instead of having to wait the 3 business days for the background check and all the stuff that goes along with that. In addition to that, I think that Florida permit is honored in 38 other states now. I mean, it could change tomorrow. It could have changed yesterday. You never really know. But if you're traveling by car and you're going through multiple states, we pretty much know that Massachusetts is not going to like us, Jersey, New York, Illinois, Minnesota, California. Those are the states that pretty much don't like guns. So it's kind of one of those things where you want to avoid those places. But that's the advantage of having that permit. And in addition to that, if you're in a car stop and you got a cop roll up on you and he's asking you for your license, registration, and insurance, sometimes if you got the permit, it's not a bad idea to just give him that permit. So you give him the license, your carry permit, your insurance, and your car registration as a kind of a silent way. And some people will disagree with that. Okay, I get it. I know one guy, he's a gun guy, I like him. But he says, I'm not going to tell them any more than they need to know. Okay. But I just remember I worked for Sarasota County Sheriff's Office. I stopped a kid down on 41 and he had a carry permit. And I asked him what he was carrying. And he said, oh, it's a Smith & Wesson. I finally had to ask him the barrel length and the model and everything like that. And when he told me, it was one of my favorite guns. I said, well, let's check it out. And he looked at me like I was a lunatic. And he got it out. We unloaded. I go, oh, fantastic gun. I said, because you're carrying this gun tonight, you don't get a ticket. I gave him the gun. So his choice of firearms got him out of a ticket. I probably wouldn't have rolled him anyway because he was a nice kid. But depending on the cop, and they're not all like me, luckily, you might end up striking up a conversation with an officer that's a pro 2A guy, and it might get you a warning instead of a ticket. But of course, if you get stopped by a cop, don't say, hey, Buehler, this retired fossil, told me this. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but I'm telling you it happened to me one time for a young kid. But anyway, I just, there could be some advantages to it, but for me, the advantages outweigh on a personal level. And then I think you create a whole new, different type of contact dynamic with an officer when he sees your open carry. Joe, there's a couple other things that people have to think about. When you take a concealed weapons training class, generally you're going to learn about the places you don't take a gun. You don't take it into the airport. You don't go into a federal building, a sheriff's office or police department, things like that, 1,000 feet within a school zone, things like that. Whereas if you just decide you're going to open carry, constitutional carry, and you're not going to get any training, you might make an innocent mistake that could get you locked up for a short period of time, get you some fines and things like that you don't want to do.
And here in Florida, every 2 blocks you drive, there's a school.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we all, whether we like it or not, are driving by school zones all the time.
Well, and the school thing is, you could drive down Fruitville when school's letting out all the time you want, with or without a permit. It doesn't really make any difference as long as nothing happens. But if you get stopped because maybe you exceeded the speed limit, or let's say you get rear-ended, and then you get out of your car and you're open carry without a permit in a school zone, and there's going to be a deputy there. Now you're really in trouble. So we can't always predict what's going to happen to us. And that's why if you are paying attention to what you're doing and you get a little extra training and you have your permit that makes you a little bit safer when it comes to things like that, you're not going to run into problems with the law. Another thing that I just, as we're talking, I kind of thought of it, is open carry. You'll never see a police car that doesn't have a big tear in the driver's seat from a holster that's riding on the upholstery. And so I don't know what kind of car you drive, but if you're going to open carry, you're either going to have the back, by the mag well is going to be digging into the backrest, or you're going to have the holster itself is digging into the seat cushion. And then you're going to have to find a good upholstery shop that you're going to have to go to and deal with.
I haven't thought of that in a million years.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have thought of that. I don't open carry, but nonetheless,
probably going to be an upholstery shop that's going to come out with, an ad, we fix, open carry, torn car seats.
The other one is sole level of responsibility. If you had to use your firearm in self-defense.
Yeah.
And how will the court view you or the jury will view you?
There's 2 things that you have to think about in terms of if you ever had to use your gun. And there's a criminal aspect and there's a civil aspect. So to get locked up for a criminal violation, there has to be proof beyond a reasonable doubt from a jury. They'd believe in that you created that violation beyond a reasonable doubt. Not all doubt, but beyond a reasonable doubt. High standard, 90+%. Okay, and that's good because that keeps a lot of people that don't need to go to jail out of jail, but it also keeps some people that need to be in jail out of jail. So there's a trade-off on everything. But the other part that you probably have to worry about more so is the civil aspect. Let's say you had to shoot somebody, you didn't have any training, you didn't have a concealed carry permit, you're open carry because you wanted to provoke the situation and you had to use your gun. When you get sued, they only need 51% of proof that you did something wrong. Not going to lock you up. You're not going to prison or jail or anything like that, but that's where they take your car, your 401k. They attach your wages or something like that. If you think back to the O.J. Simpson case, the jury didn't find O.J. guilty for the murders at all. But Petroselli, the attorney, the civil attorney, came in and sued O.J. on behalf of the Goldman and the Simpson families. And the jury came back with an overwhelming verdict that said, yeah, he did this and he owes this money. So understand that you might dodge a bullet where you don't end up in custody, but maybe you're going to be living in a dumpster behind Wendy's on 41, eating some stale burgers because they took all your money. It's all how you want to do it.
So getting a permit, what is the advantage of getting a permit in that respect?
Well, a permit, if you're in front of a jury and you can say, I took a 4 or 6 hour permit class, I obtained my permit. I also took some classes from Joe Yeager from Executive Dump, one of the best firearms instructors around. Well, all of a sudden the jury's going to be awarding you money because you went and got training from Joe. but it just, if you have a sincere delivery and you can show them that you did more than the average Joe, and you're certainly not the average Joe, but if you did more to make the situation as safe as possible, jurors are going to notice that. And that may keep you from getting in trouble with a jury in a civil case. The criminal, that's going to be what it's going to be. You don't have a lot of control over that. But it's a civil one that worries me more than the criminal one. Now, they can't take your house in Florida if you're homesteaded, is my understanding. But they could take your car. They could take your retirement. They could attach wages and things like that. And, it's getting paid to somebody who probably never had a job in his life. And he just decided to be a jerk on that particular day. And then you attracted him because you were open carry. I don't know. I don't think I'd want to be in that boat. Okay. I don't go out on the boat without a life jacket. I don't drive the car without insurance and a seatbelt. I don't go out in society without a gun. I mean, that's kind of it. But I also have my permit, and I have a little extra ammo, and I have a round in the chamber.
Okay.
But
John, this was terrific. And one thing is for sure is that, as I said in the very beginning of the video, you've taught thousands of students. I mean, your resume is enough to make anyone confident in taking instruction from you.
Thanks.
Where can they find you if they wanted to take lessons from you?
Well, they can just roll into Shoot Straight. My cards are there. And I don't have a real active website because I'm not a tech guy. I'm a hands-on guy. I mean, your business model to me, and we've talked about this many times. You have a very impressive business model, the way you go about it. I'm more of a hands-on teacher. I do a lot of private classes, one-on-one. I teach the security guards because I have a K license. And then, of course, I train with you or then with Billy from 3T. So the three of us kind of cover, I really believe between the three of us, we cover what anybody is really going to need. And we have fun doing it. And we're not doing it because we have to. We do it because we enjoy it and try to give them the best bang for their buck.
That's for sure. That's for sure. And just if it helps everyone, I'll put that number in below. Is that Shoot Straight in Sarasota. The number is 941-360-2335. You can call up and ask to take lessons with John Buehler.
And you can call and ask for lessons from Joe Yeager from Executive Gun.
This is about you today, John. This is about you today.
and,
This is about you. And we can't thank you enough for your time, for your expertise, and for your knowledge in helping us decipher and helping gun owners who wish to open carry decipher the physical, the mental, and the legal part of open carry now that it's legal in Florida.
Yeah, a little bit of a risk, but if you want to take it, I get it. It's just, I'd rather be concealed for me, but I wouldn't think less
John,
if you weren't.
Thanks a million.
Always
man.
good to see you,
It's a
Joe.
real pleasure.
Okay, right back at you.
John and I hope you found this conversation helpful and would love to read your feedback in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, please smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and watch the next video right here. Train hard, often, and safely, and I'll see you at the range.